Did you know there was a day when the Great Sphinx of Giza disappeared? Not in legend, not in myth, in the real desert, under a real sky, on the very plateau where millions of visitors stand today. Imagine a clear morning in ancient Egypt. The air is cool before the noon heat. Priests move in white linen, pouring libations at the Sphinx's paws. Workers sweep sand from the carved limestone body, its lion form stretching out beside the causeway to the pyramids. Incense smoke curls around its chest. Hymns echo off the surrounding cliffs. For a moment, this guardian of the horizon is alive with rituals, with offerings, with the footsteps of pharaohs. Now jump forward centuries, same place, same colossus, but almost everything has vanished. The great lion body is gone. The altar between its paws is gone. The temple at its side is drowned. Only a weathered stone face peers out of a sea of sand, like a drowning giant frozen at the moment of its last breath. There was a specific moment when this happened, a day when the Sphinx effectively slipped beneath the desert and out of human sight. Archaeologists can trace the rising drifts, the way the enclosure acts as a natural sand trap. They know that by the time of Thutmose IV, only the head and part of the neck were visible. His famous dream stele says he found it buried up to its chin. But what really happened on the day the last workers walked away and the sand finally won? The strange thing is this: for thousands of years, the Egyptians wrote about everything: temples and taxes, rituals and royal festivals, the journey through the underworld, the duat with its gates and terrifying guardians. They carved whole books for the afterlife into tomb walls, yet not a single surviving text calmly explains, "We let the Sphinx be buried," or "We hid it for a reason." The silence around that moment is almost louder than an inscription. Most of us grew up believing the Sphinx has always stood there, fully visible, watching over the pyramids like an eternal sentinel. But old legends tell a different story. For most of its existence, this monument was not towering above the sand. It was trapped inside it, sometimes buried to the neck, sometimes almost completely entombed, so that travelers could walk past and never know an ancient guardian slept just beneath their feet. According to the stories told by archaeologists, the answer is simple: wind, erosion, neglect. The enclosure lies lower than the plateau, a perfect basin where desert storms pour in grain after grain until even stone drowns. But other traditions, the teachings of mystery schools and esoteric circles, whisper about a different possibility. What if the burial was not just an accident of nature, but a deliberate concealment? What if priests once agreed that the guardian should fall silent, that its presence and its secrets should be covered over by the desert itself? If that is true, then another question opens. What kind of knowledge was so powerful it had to sleep beneath the sand? What was the Sphinx really guarding? Who wanted it hidden? And why did each great uncovering seem to mark a turning point in Egypt's story? Most importantly, can tracing the day it vanished help us understand the rituals, the schools, and the hidden chambers that may still lie waiting in the bedrock below? We'll find out together by following the trail of sand, silence, and stone. Welcome back to the channel. Here we explore the mysteries, history, and forgotten lore of ancient Egypt, slowly and calmly, so you can relax, unwind, and drift off while learning about one of the most fascinating civilizations in human history, from the pyramids and hidden chambers beneath the sands to the gods, pharaohs, and ancient stories carved into temple walls along the Nile. If you enjoy relaxing history like this, consider subscribing and joining us for more journeys into the ancient world. Now, dim the lights, get comfortable, and let's return to the sands of Egypt. What was so dangerous about a sleeping lion? If the Sphinx is a guardian, what happens when the guardian is buried alive? Imagine a temple where the door is not just closed, but erased. No threshold, no passage, no warning sign that a gate ever existed. If the Sphinx marks a crossing between worlds, then covering it in sand is not simple neglect. It is sealing a portal. But which portal? A gate into the afterlife? An entrance into hidden schools? Or a doorway into a kind of knowledge certain pharaohs and priests no longer wanted in circulation? Did you know that in a civilization obsessed with inscriptions, offerings, and royal boasts, there is no proud decree that says, "We buried the Sphinx"? No temple wall celebrating the day the great lion was finally tamed by the desert. No ritual calendar marking a ceremony of sacred concealment. For thousands of years, Egypt recorded grain counts, river levels, even the number of geese brought to a festival. Yet on the question of the Sphinx's burial, the record falls almost silent. That silence may be the loudest clue of all. Archaeologists point to the Giza plateau itself. The Sphinx lies in a lowered enclosure, a natural sand trap, where wind from the desert pours in grains like water into a basin. Leave it unattended for a few decades, and the lion's body disappears. By the New Kingdom, according to the stories carved on Thutmose IV's dream stele, only the head and part of the neck were visible. The prince dreams beneath the chin of a half-drowned colossus, is promised kingship if he clears the sand, and wakes to uncover the guardian. The result? A new pharaoh, a new mandate, a new chapter in Egypt's journey. This pattern repeats. In the Sate period, when older traditions were being revived, the Sphinx is cleared again. Under the Romans, when foreign emperors claimed the mantle of pharaoh, its body re-emerges from the dunes. In the 19th and 20th centuries, as modern science, archaeology, and new spiritual movements rise, Emil Barres and Selim Hassan finally free the Sphinx completely, each uncovering lines up with a turning point in power, religion, or worldview, as if awakening the lion resets the story. So was this just erosion and chance? Or was the Sphinx being used like a cosmic switch, buried when a gate needed to close, revealed when a forgotten current of knowledge was ready to surge back into the world? Old legends tell a different story than the neat, accidental sand narrative. They hint that monuments were not only stone, but teaching devices. Mystery schools in limestone and granite, silent textbooks in the language of proportion, star alignments, and ritual pathways. In this series, we treat the Sphinx as part of that curriculum, a guardian statue that may also be a lesson in thresholds, in sacred silence, and in how access to the invisible world can be controlled. Most importantly, we'll find out together whether its burial was a geological accident or a deliberate act of spiritual and political engineering. In the next part, we will trace the archaeological timeline the shifting motives of pharaohs and priests, and the most esoteric readings of this lion in the sand, to answer a deceptively simple question: who closed this gate, and who waited for the day it would open again? From eternal monument to sleeping colossus, there was indeed a day when the Sphinx vanished, not in legend, but in the quiet, relentless language of sand. To understand why this colossus slept for thousands of years, we have to step into the slow timeline that archaeologists have pieced together stone by stone. According to the standard story, the Great Sphinx was carved in the Old Kingdom around 2500 BCE, most likely under the pharaoh Khafre. Imagine the builders cutting a trench straight into the limestone plateau, leaving the lion body and human face rising from a lowered pit. Beautiful engineering, but also a trap. That sunken enclosure lies below the level of the surrounding desert, a perfect basin where desert winds pour sand like water into a bowl. Did you know that in just a few decades of neglect, that basin can fill almost to the top? No curses, no secret rituals required, just wind, dunes, and time. When teams of workers cleared the sand, the Sphinx stood free. When the labor stopped, the desert quietly took it back. This cycle of uncovering and burial would repeat again and again, turning the Sphinx from eternal monument into a sleeping colossus. By the New Kingdom, around 1,000 years after Khafre, only the head and part of the neck were visible. The body was gone, swallowed by the plateau itself. Around 1400 BCE, a young prince named Thutmose rested in the shade of that half-buried face and, according to the stories, fell asleep. In his dream, the Sphinx spoke, promising him kingship if he would clear away the sand. Thutmose became Pharaoh Thutmose IV, and he set up the famous dream stele between the paws, recording that the great image had been buried up to its chin. Later, Site rulers in the late period ordered new clearances. Roman engineers dug again, leaving repair blocks and inscriptions. Each time the sand was removed, Egypt was in a phase of revival, looking back to older glory. Each time the clearances ended, winds returned, and the Sphinx slowly drowned in grains of stone, until modern excavations in the 19th and early 20th centuries finally exposed the full body we recognize today. On one level, this is a simple, physical story, but what really happened in the Egyptian imagination when their guardian sank beneath the surface? In their world, burial was never just neglect. It was a ritual condition. Bodies placed in tombs were not thrown away. They were planted, entering the Duat for a dangerous journey through gates, trials, and chambers of transformation. So what happens when the guardian of that journey disappears into the earth itself? To a culture that saw the land as a living temple, a buried Sphinx could be read as a being in incubation, hidden in the womb of the desert, holding its power in silence. Old legends tell a different story than mere erosion. They hint that when the Sphinx slept, a door between worlds narrowed. Most of us grew up thinking of the pyramids and the Sphinx as static tomb markers, frozen memorials to dead pharaohs. But the mystery school view sees something else. A campus of stone, a network of schools where priests and initiates trained for the afterlife while still breathing. In that light, the Sphinx is not just a monument, it is a teacher, a threshold, a test, and most importantly, If this guardian could move between visibility and burial, between speech and silence, what kind of knowledge was being signaled to those who watched? In the next section, we'll step beyond the archaeological timeline and into that more dangerous question. Was the Sphinx's long sleep only a geological accident or part of a deliberate curriculum in a much older, hidden school? Who was allowed to approach the Lion of Giza? If the Sphinx was part of a hidden school, then the next question becomes uncomfortable. Who, exactly, was allowed near its classroom doors? In the old kingdom dawn, the Giza plateau was not a tourist site. It was a stage. Picture a processional road of crushed limestone, dust rising around gilded palanquins, while pharaohs in shimmering white linen and leopard skin cloaks move toward the Lion of Giza. Priests swing heavy incense burners, scribes clutch scrolls, drums and sistrums mark a slow, hypnotic rhythm. And beyond the line of guards, an entire nation watches from a distance, seeing only the outer form of the Sphinx, never the secrets whispered at its feet. Did you know that in Egypt, religion was both public and hidden at the same time? Most people could join temple festivals, carry small statues of the gods through the streets, or pay for simple funerary rituals to help their dead cross into the afterlife. They brought bread, beer, and flowers, and they prayed in open courtyards under the sun. But old legends tell a different story about the inner circles. Behind the massive pylons and deep inside the stone chambers, access narrowed sharply. According to the stories, there were rites that only a few ever saw. High initiations, if they truly existed, were not for the crowds. They were for a thin layer of priests, astronomer scribes, and the royal family, trained like surgeons of the soul. While the public heard myths, these elites memorized star calendars, underworld maps, and precise sequences of spoken names. The difference was not just status, it was curriculum. In that world, the Sphinx was more than a monument. It was a threshold guardian. Its body lay in a sunken enclosure below the level of the plateau, like a deliberate descent into another layer of reality. Mystery school language would say it stood on the border between the visible world and the duat, the vast underworld the Egyptians believed stretched beneath and beyond the Nile. To walk down into that hollow, especially at night, was to symbolically step toward the first of many gates. Those who approached were not casual visitors. They were candidates for transformation. For them, the goal was not only a good burial with a nice tomb and proper offerings. The goal was mastery over consciousness itself. They wanted to learn how to stay awake through death, to face judgment with awareness, to navigate rebirth rather than be swept along by it. Under that reading, the Sphinx's unblinking gaze becomes a test. Do you know yourself? Can you hold your mind steady under fear? Now imagine this in second person. You stand at dusk in the shadow of the Sphinx. The heat of the day is draining away, and the sand beneath your feet is finally cool. Torches flare along the edge of the enclosure. Priests in white form a circle and begin a low rising chant that vibrates in your chest. Behind you, the city and its ordinary sounds fade. Ahead of you is only stone, silence, and that colossal face staring past you into eternity. You have heard the public stories. You have attended festivals. You know the outer religion. But tonight, A hand gestures you forward past the point where most people must stop. What kind of knowledge waits in that forbidden space? You understand that stepping closer is not just an honor. It is a decision. It means entering a curriculum designed to prepare you for your own death, to rehearse the journey through the duat while your heart still beats. Would you take that step, or would you stay safely among the spectators, pretending the Lion of Giza is only a statue? In the next section, we'll find out how later pharaohs answered that question, and why one prince claimed that uncovering the Sphinx itself opened the way to a throne. A guardian silenced. What changes when the Sphinx is buried? So what happens to a guardian when its gate disappears? If the Sphinx is a threshold keeper, then burying it is not just losing a statue under sand. It is like closing a cosmic door. In Egyptian symbolic language, an open gate invites passage, questions, and risk. A sealed gate, on the other hand, can mean safety. No more intruders, no more unprepared souls wandering in. But it can also mean the end of a certain kind of access. A school with its doors bricked up. A temple with its lamps extinguished. Did you know that by the time of Thutmose IV, the Sphinx was buried up to its chin? Only the head watched the horizon, while the body, the lion that once framed the path, was locked in a natural stone basin, a perfect sand trap. To the priests who still remembered, this was not random. The guardian's body, the part that marked the boundary, had vanished. The gate was half closed. Now look at when these burials happen. Periods of foreign rule. Times when central power weakens. Shifts when older priestly families lose funding, land, and most importantly, influence. When the mystery schools lose their patrons, the rituals grow quieter, without regular offerings and processions to clear the causeway. The desert does the rest. The wind erases footprints. The sand covers altars. The Sphinx enclosure fills in within decades. On the surface, it is neglect. But old legends tell a different story. According to the stories, priests watched the sand as if it were a clock. They knew the plateau would swallow what was not tended. So we have to ask, did they simply fail to stop it, or did they allow it? In a culture that believed in cycles of revelation and concealment, was the Sphinx's burial accepted as the closing of one chapter of knowledge, so another could begin elsewhere? Imagine the spiritual risk. If approaching the Sphinx once meant stepping into an initiatory field, a place where the air itself carried the memory of chants and rehearsals for the afterlife, what happens when that field disappears under dunes? Does the culture lose a training ground for the duat? A whole curriculum of facing fear and judgment? Or does that curriculum move into hidden chambers under other temples, whispered in smaller circles, transformed into more secret texts, guarded by fewer and fewer priests? For thousands of years, travelers walked above this buried lion without knowing that, beneath their feet, an entire style of initiation might be sleeping. The gate was still there, but the handle was gone. But what really happened at the moment, just before the sand won? One prince in particular leaves a clue. Thutmose IV claimed that as he rested in the Sphinx's shadow, the buried guardian spoke to him in a dream, promising kingship if he cleared the sand. Was he the last to receive a direct transmission from this silent school? Or was that dream the signal that the guardian was ready to fall quiet again and let the desert finish closing the gate. Thutmose IV and the dream beneath the lion's chin. So who was this prince resting beneath a half-buried lion? Thutmose was not yet Thutmose IV, the pharaoh. He was a younger son, a man on the margins of power, riding and hunting on the Giza plateau, where royal ancestors slept in stone. Imagine the desert heat shimmering, the wind hissing over dunes, and in the middle of it all, a colossal face rising from an ocean of sand. By the time he arrived, the Sphinx was buried up to its neck. Only the head, the royal Neme's headdress, and a hint of the chest broke the surface. The enormous paws, the long lion body, the enclosure walls around it, those were hidden, sealed in a natural sand-filled chamber. Did you know the Sphinx's hollow around the body sits lower than the surrounding plateau, forming a perfect trap? Without constant care, it vanishes in decades. According to the stories carved in stone, the prince lay down in the shade of that lonely head and fell asleep. What happened next is preserved on a granite slab still standing between the Sphinx's paws. The dream stele. Its inscription tells us that the Sphinx was not just a statue. In the dream, it speaks as the god Horomakhet Kreperi Ra'atum, a fusion of horizon, sunrise, noontime sun, and the ancient creator. The god complains that sand chokes his body. He is suffocating. Then comes the promise. If the young Thutmose will clear away the sand and restore the monument, the god will grant him something almost unthinkable: the kingship of Egypt, a buried lion for a future pharaoh, a simple act of excavation in exchange for the throne. Most importantly, the stele ties these two events together in a single sentence of destiny. To uncover the Sphinx is to awaken the guardian. To awaken the guardian is to legitimize the ruler. The stone itself sits exactly where initiates would stand, between the paws, beneath the lion's chin, at the threshold of its chest. It is a physical reminder that passing under this gaze was not just symbolic, it was required. Was this only clever propaganda written after Thutmose seized power, or are we seeing the fossil of an initiatory ritual? A prince in a liminal state between waking and sleep, a god of horizons speaking from a half-buried mouth, a task of digging that is at once practical and deeply symbolic. In the language of mystery schools, that is the classic pattern of initiation. Encounter the guardian, receive a command, then prove worth through a journey of labor. Old legends tell a different story than mere politics. They hint that the Sphinx marked a gate, and that the state of the gate mattered. When the body was buried, the path was muted. When the sand was cleared, the channel opened. If a pharaoh's right to rule could be anchored to his relationship with this sleeping lion, what kind of knowledge was Egypt really protecting? Perhaps the Sphinx's burial was more than neglect. Perhaps it was a ritual barometer, a visible sign of how closely Egypt walked with its own hidden teachings. When the guardian slept, the deeper schools went quiet. When it was awakened, certain doors in the invisible world swung open again. But what really happened when later rulers let the desert reclaim it once more? In the next part, we'll find out together how each uncovering and reburial mirrors a turning point in Egypt's spiritual memory. Scrolls, stelae, and silent libraries. Those doors, the Egyptians believed, did not only exist in dreams and rituals. Some were carved into stone, others were buried beneath it, and a few, according to the stories, were never meant to be opened by just anyone. Did you know that long after the Old Kingdom, Greek and Roman writers kept hinting that Egypt still guarded secret chambers and hidden books? Herodotus spoke of underground galleries beneath temples. Pliny the Elder mentioned ancient records and medicinal recipes locked away by priests. Later authors whispered about labyrinths at places like Saqqara and Hawara, halls of columns and corridors where only initiates could walk. They rarely named the Sphinx, but they agreed on one thing: Egyptian knowledge went down as well as up. To these visitors, the pyramids and temples were not only monuments, they were schools, and the curriculum was written on many levels at once. On the outer walls, we see carved scenes of pharaohs making offerings, boats sailing through the sky, rows of gods and gates. On fragile papyrus scrolls, priests copied hymns, medical formulas, and precise instructions for the afterlife journey. In the dim light of sanctuaries, those same texts came alive as rituals, chants, and processions. Most importantly, the very architecture carried meaning. Axes of temples lined up with solstices and star risings. Courtyards narrowed into dark inner chambers that echoed with sound. A ceiling full of stars at Dendera, or a shaft in the Great Pyramid pointing toward Orion, is not just decoration. It is a sentence written in stone and starlight. Old legends tell a different story about these places, that the monuments themselves were three-dimensional texts, silent libraries you had to walk through, not simply read. Imagine a library with no shelves, where the pages are distances, angles, and the way light enters at a certain hour. Access is controlled not by locks, but by gates of initiation. Only those who passed certain trials could cross a threshold, hear a resonance, or stand in a spot where a particular star appears in a doorway. This is how mystery schools taught. Knowledge was not just told, it was staged. Now think about the Sphinx enclosure. It lies sunken below the Giza plateau, cut down into the bedrock so that walls of raw stone rise around the lion's body. When fully cleared, it feels less like an open courtyard and more like an open-air chamber, a sunlit well in the desert. Sand pours in easily. Silence gathers there even faster. For thousands of years, that pit has acted like a natural vault. While the head of the Sphinx looked out across the sands, its body slept in a rock-walled basin. Is it any wonder that later traditions began to imagine that beneath or very near this guardian, some archive of primordial knowledge might be sealed away? What kind of knowledge would deserve a guardian with a lion's body and a human face? By late antiquity and into the medieval period, scattered hints about secret books, underground halls, and houses of life fused with the Sphinx's enigmatic presence. Esoteric writers began to speak of a hall of records, a hidden library, literal or symbolic, containing the blueprint of an earlier age. Some placed it beneath the paws, others beneath the plateau itself, but they agreed on the pattern: a great archive, guarded by a great question. We do not have to endorse any single theory to see why this idea refuses to die. The classical hints of buried scrolls, the Egyptian habit of encoding teachings in architecture, and the Sphinx's position inside its own carved chamber. They suggest that Egypt understood knowledge as something to be veiled, layered, and guarded. But if there truly was a silent library near the Sphinx, how was it used? Who was allowed to enter? And what did they encounter beyond those stone walls? In the next section, we'll find out together how the Hall of Records motif grew from scattered clues in the past into one of the most haunting mysteries of Giza. Lasers, voids, and the new X-ray eyes on Giza. To find that silent library, we have to change how we look at Giza. Not as a postcard of pyramids and a lonely sphinx, but as a living laboratory, wired with sensors and scanned with invisible light. Today, archaeologists and engineers sweep the plateau with ground-penetrating radar, seismic surveys, and even cosmic ray X-rays called muon tomography. Did you know that every second, particles from deep space rain down through the stone, tracing out where the rock is solid and where it hides empty space? To modern teams, the desert becomes a data field. To the ancients, it was a field of gods. In 2017, the Scan Pyramids project announced something astonishing. Using muons, they detected a massive, hidden void above the Grand Gallery in the Great Pyramid, a space at least as long as a passenger jet. No entrance, no visible doorway, just a silent cavity sealed in stone for thousands of years. Old legends tell a different story about such places, whispering of secret chambers where pharaohs and priests prepared for the afterlife. But what really happened inside that unseen volume? A structural weight relief zone or an initiation hall turned to stone? Around the Sphinx, earlier surveys had already hinted that the ground itself holds memories. Radar and seismic work revealed tunnels, fissures, and man-made cavities cut into the bedrock. Some passages run toward the body, others branch away under the plateau like veins. According to the stories, there were once hidden chambers beneath the pores, a house of life where sacred texts and rituals were guarded from the unprepared. Modern reports speak more cautiously of shafts and anomalies, yet the pattern is the same. The rock below is not empty. When we step down into the Sphinx enclosure, the physical reality is even stranger. The monument does not simply sit on the desert. The entire body is carved from a lowered rectangle of bedrock, a great pit chopped down into the plateau. Cut faces of limestone rise around it like the walls of a submerged court. Drainage channels snake along the floor. Ancient repair blocks and retaining walls hug the sides, layer upon layer, proof that generations kept returning, shoring up this sunken space instead of letting it vanish. From a mainstream view, these are practical features: erosion control, structural reinforcement, perhaps settings for offerings and processions. But what kind of knowledge asks for a lion-bodied guardian sunk in a rock-cut basin, ringed by channels that could echo with water or sound? Through the mystery school lens, that enclosure starts to look like an underworld rehearsal chamber, a symbolic canyon between worlds where initiates descended, step by step, toward the questions of death. Now, jump with us. Satellite imagery fades in, clean lines, 3D scans, color-coded voids pulsing on a digital model of the plateau. A cursor hovers over the Sphinx, over the Great Pyramid, over the hidden spaces the muons reveal. Cut. Torchlight floods a narrow passage, Sand crunches under bare feet. Hooded figures move single file down a rock-cut corridor near the Sphinx, walls sweating moisture, air dense with incense and whispered spells. The same limestone that appears as colored pixels on a scientist's screen becomes, in their world, a living script. Every niche a sentence, every turn a gate. Most importantly, both readings are real in their own ways. One measures mass and void. The other measures courage, memory, and the soul's readiness to pass through the duat. And we'll find out together, in the next part, how those two ways of seeing might finally meet when we follow and initiate through a full Sphinx-side death and return. Why bury the teacher? The deeper question of silence. So now we face a stranger question. If this whole complex was a living script for the soul, a training ground for courage and memory, then why was the teacher allowed to disappear? Why let the Sphinx, the supposed guardian of the gates, be swallowed again and again by its own desert classroom? Archaeologists remind us that the Sphinx sits in a natural sand trap, lower than the plateau, where winds can fill the enclosure in decades. They are right, but what really happened when the sand was not cleared? When priests stopped sweeping? When rituals fell silent? When for thousands of years only the stone face watched above a buried body? Was that just neglect or a decision? In many mystery traditions, there is an idea almost as important as revelation itself: withdrawal. Teachings appear in one age, then vanish in the next. Scrolls are hidden, symbols are encoded, schools close their doors when a civilization is no longer aligned or ready. Did you know some esoteric commentators look at the Sphinx's burial as architecture performing this same act? A physical closing of the book, written not on papyrus, but in sand. Imagine the priests realizing that the rituals performed here, the rehearsals of death, the sound experiments in the chambers, the drills for meeting underworld guardians, were being hollowed out into empty ceremony. Imagine foreign armies passing through, hungry for power, not wisdom. At what point does a true mystery school decide that the greatest protection is silence? Old legends tell a different story than mere erosion. According to the stories, when the Sphinx sleeps, a door between worlds narrows. When it wakes, like in the time of Thutmose IV, who cleared the sand and placed his dream stela between its paws, kingdoms shift, new lines of pharaohs rise, forgotten knowledge stirs. Every uncovering is a risk, every reburial a deliberate closing of the gates. So we circle back to the unsettling core. What kind of knowledge was transmitted here that could not simply be left lying around? What did initiates learn between those lion paws that was so powerful, so identity-shaping, that it might need to be shielded from invaders, and, perhaps more disturbingly, shielded from a people who had forgotten how to carry it responsibly? Maybe the real key does not lie in the stone lion alone, but in the world view it once embodied. A universe where death is not an end, but a journey with specific checkpoints. A duat mapped like a landscape, filled with rivers, caverns, gates, and judges. A culture where the highest form of education was not learning to rule a kingdom, but learning to navigate that invisible terrain without losing the heart. If a guardian was buried, then what was it guarding? To answer that, we have to do something daring. We have to walk past the pores, through the hidden schools, and step straight into the Egyptian map of the afterlife itself, and see what waits on the other side of the first gate. The Duat, Egypt's invisible landscape beneath the sand. To step through that first gate, we have to accept an idea that changes everything. For the ancient Egyptians, death was not a wall. It was a doorway into a vast, structured realm called the Duat. Most of us grew up thinking of the underworld as a vague, shadowy place. But old legends tell a different story. The Duat was imagined as a complete landscape, a mirror of the Nile Valley that also stretched beyond it, an invisible Egypt beneath the sand. There were rivers and fields, islands and caverns, cities of the dead and courts of the gods. It was a hidden double of the world we know, but charged with spiritual fire. Imagine descending into that realm. Around us, rivers of darkness and rivers of light run side by side, twisting like black and golden serpents under the earth. Caverns open out, their ceilings glittering with starfire instead of torches. Fields of reeds sway under a sky that is not blue, but deep and velvety black, pierced by slow-moving constellations. Silent barks glide over subterranean waters, their prows carved like cobras and falcons, leaving no wake at all. Along the banks stand gates, not simple doors, but monumental thresholds guarded by beings with composite forms, crocodile lions with human eyes, serpents wearing crowns, women with scorpion tails, falcon-headed judges holding knives of light. Did you know that, according to the stories, each of these guardians demanded exact knowledge before allowing passage? A name, a phrase, a declaration of purity, spoken without fear. The Duat was not chaos. It was organized into 12 great regions, often called the 12 hours of night, through which the sun god Ra sailed in his bark every evening. In the first hour, he entered the western horizon. By the 12th, he emerged reborn in the east. Each hour had its own canals, islands, gates, guardians, and, most importantly, its own tests. Lakes of fire burned away what did not belong. Serpents coiled around the enemies of light. Blessed souls joined the crew of the solar bark, helping Ra battle the great serpent of unmaking. The astonishing part is that this was not only a journey for gods. If a person was properly prepared, if the rituals had been done, the body preserved, the heart kept true, their soul could accompany Ra through the Duat. But there were rules. Names were power. Geography was survival. To pass a gate, the soul had to recite the guardian's secret name, speak the correct response, and often offer a specific spell from memory, like a cosmic passport. This is why the Egyptians filled tombs and mystery schools with maps, star charts, and long scrolls of sacred words. What kind of knowledge could be more important than the knowledge that keeps a soul from being lost forever? Now, look again at the Sphinx, a lion's body, symbol of strength and protection, a human head, symbol of consciousness and speech, facing the point where Ra rises from the 12th hour of night. It stands exactly where sky meets desert, where day breaks out of darkness. In this light, the Sphinx is not just a monument. It is a threshold figure, an above-ground symbol of the gates and guardians of the Duat. Below, for thousands of years, people walked past its buried body without realizing that, In Egyptian thought, a guardian like this marked the place where worlds touch. If the duat was a real landscape to them, then structures on the surface could be its visible anchors. But what really happened when a living person trained to walk that underworld before death? How did the mystery schools turn myths on papyrus into direct, terrifying experience in stone chambers under the sand? We'll find out together when we step inside those hidden schools and listen to what the rituals were actually designed to do. Maps for the dead, books of the underworld. To understand those rituals, we have to look at the textbooks of the dead. Did you know the Egyptians left an entire library for the afterlife? Not in one building, but scattered across pyramids, coffins, scrolls, and amulets. The earliest layer is carved deep inside royal pyramids, the pyramid texts. Later, the same spells spread onto wooden coffins as the coffin texts. By the New Kingdom, they unfold on long papyri we call the Book of the Dead, though the Egyptians knew it as the Book of Coming Forth by Day. Alongside these, more secret works appear: the Amduat, the Book of Gates, the Book of Caverns. Together, they form a curriculum of the underworld. These were not simple prayers. They read like manuals, maps, dialogues, password lists. One spell tells the soul what to say when a gatekeeper demands its name. Another explains how to board the solar boat without being thrown into the waters of chaos. There are instructions for avoiding decapitation, for keeping the heart from testifying against the person in judgment, for recognizing which serpent is an ally and which one devours the careless. In a world where the duat was as real as the Nile, these texts were survival guides. Imagine stepping into a tomb chamber lit by a single flickering flame. Every wall is covered, edge to edge, with rows of figures, boats, serpents, and bands of hieroglyphs. The ceiling becomes the star-strewn body of the sky goddess. On one wall, the sun god sails through a river of darkness, surrounded by deities with animal heads and towering crowns. On another, coiled serpents spit fire at shadowy enemies. Each scene is a frozen moment in the sun's nightly journey. Each caption is a line in a cosmic play that the soul must perform on cue. Miss your line, and the scene changes from passage to punishment. According to the stories, precision was everything. To speak the wrong name before a guardian was to be turned back. To mispronounce a word in a crucial spell was to lose one's way in a maze of caverns. Some texts even warn that a demon will cut off the head of anyone who cannot identify it correctly. Most importantly, the heart itself is questioned. If it weighs heavier than Ma'at's feather of truth, it is thrown to the devourer, and the journey ends in silence. But these writings were not meant to be read for the first time after death. Old legends tell a different story. Pharaohs and priests studied them while alive in hidden chambers that functioned as mystery schools. In torchlit halls, initiates recited entire sections of the Amduat from memory, tracing with their fingers the path of the sun through 12 hours of night. They practiced the dialogues of the Book of Gates as if rehearsing a role, learning exactly what to say at each threshold. What kind of knowledge turns a tomb into a classroom? For thousands of years, this training turned life itself into a prolonged initiation. The body walked under the sun, but the mind walked the duat. And when the time came to lie down in stone, the soul was not a frightened stranger in the dark. It was a graduate returning to a well-mapped world. But if the texts were the curriculum, where did the final exams take place? What hidden rooms were built to simulate the gates of the underworld itself? We'll find out together when we follow the initiates into the deepest training chambers beneath the sand, rehearsing death, training for the duat while still breathing. Those final exams were not taken on parchment. They were taken in the dark. Here is the real twist in the Egyptian mystery. The most advanced students did not wait until their heart stopped beating to meet the duat. They used architecture, sound, and carefully controlled altered states to cross its gates while still breathing. Death was not a surprise. It was a rehearsed performance. Did you know that in this system, each role had a place in the drama? Pharaohs walked in as living Horus, destined to become Osiris, lord of the underworld. High priests acted as directors and gatekeepers, trained to guide consciousness through terror and ecstasy without losing the body. Behind them came the initiates, scribes, temple functionaries, and chosen students who slowly earned access to deeper layers of knowledge, one ritual at a time. According to the stories, the training did not begin with grand visions. It began with discipline, days of fasting to thin the veil between worlds, purification baths in cold water before dawn, silence during daylight, then night vigils in temple courts while the stars wheeled overhead. The goal was simple but terrifying: to make the body so still and the mind so focused that the duat could be entered like a remembered room. Now imagine a single night on the Giza plateau. The wind has dropped. Torches flare against limestone blocks. An initiate, wrapped in plain linen, follows a high priest toward a narrow opening cut into the rock. Behind them, the Sphinx looms against the stars, its enclosure already a hidden basin of shadow below the desert floor. For thousands of years, this hollow has filled and emptied with sand, like an hourglass built for the sky. Tonight, it is a natural theatre. The descent begins. The air grows cooler. The walls close in. From ahead comes the low rhythmic chanting of the Amduat, the book of what is in the underworld. Names of serpents, lakes of fire, and secret gates echo down the stone. Each chamber represents an hour of the night, a level of the duat. Each step is a rehearsal for the moment the body finally lies still. At a carved doorway deep below, a robed figure waits. In the ritual, this priest is no longer human. He is a guardian of the gate. When the initiate approaches, the chanting stops. The guardian recites a challenge from the text, demanding the correct phrase. Heart pounding, the initiate must answer flawlessly, matching sound, rhythm, and meaning. A single mistake means turning back, climbing again toward the ordinary world. But what really happened when the answer was perfect? Some accounts hint that the initiate would then be led into a sealed chamber, left in darkness to die to the senses, while priests chanted above. The Sphinx and the descending shafts of Giza may have formed an open-air map of the duat itself, each threshold a living gate. If that is true, then burying the Sphinx was not just neglect. It was like erasing the entrance to a school. So who decided to close that door, and why? Through 12 gates, mastery by precision and courage. If the Sphinx marked the entrance, then what lay beyond that erased door? According to the stories, The duat was not a single cavern or a vague cloud realm. It was a precise itinerary, a journey laid out gate by gate, challenge by challenge, like a cosmic training course that only the prepared could pass. Did you know that in many underworld texts, the pattern repeats with almost mechanical clarity? The soul approaches a gate, a guardian appears, a serpent coiled in fire, a lion-headed being, a row of knife-wielding sentries. They demand a name, a title, a spell. The initiate must speak the secret words, declare inner truth, sometimes even deny specific sins. If the answer is exact, the gate opens. If not, the journey ends right there. This is where the Egyptian mindset feels almost technical. Each threshold follows the same rhythm: confrontation, identification, demonstration, passage. First, the initiate proves they know where they are and who stands before them. Then they recite the correct formula, often including the guardian's hidden name. Finally, they demonstrate equality, courage in the face of terror, honesty about their actions, alignment with Ma'at. Only then does the gate yield, sometimes granting a boon, protection, new powers, safe escort to the next region. But the gates are not all equal. Early on, the tests are almost like orientation drills. Do you know the names of the ferrymen? Can you recognize the lakes of fire and the islands of peace? Can you keep your bearings in a realm where time loops and rivers flow backwards? Later, repetition becomes escalation. The same structure, but with higher stakes. Now the guardians mirror back the initiate's own shadows, fears of annihilation, memories of broken oaths, unresolved actions that cling like sand in the lungs. The 12 gates form a kind of structural spine running through the duat. Each gate is linked to specific deities, symbols, and transformations. One might be ruled by a cobra goddess whose coils encircle Ra's boat, another by knife-armed beings who cut away what does not belong to the eternal self. Together, they create a curriculum. By the time an initiate could symbolically pass all 12, they were believed to be capable of traveling with Ra through the whole night and emerging renewed at dawn. Most importantly, this was a world where words themselves were creative forces. Getting a single epithet wrong, mispronouncing a guardian's name, confusing one lake for another. These were not minor mistakes. They were metaphysical missteps that could strand a soul in hostile territory. Mystery schools drilled these responses in dark chambers until they became second nature, like breathing. And yet, even with all this detail, our maps are incomplete. The Books of the Dead, the Amduat, the Book of Gates, they are overlapping excerpts, not a single master manual. Old legends tell a different story, that the highest teachings were never written at all, passed only from mouth to ear. Did the journey really end at the 12th gate, or did it continue into realms beyond the reach of ink and stone? We'll find out together as we follow what remains of that hidden trail. When the gates close, did the Sphinx's burial mark the end of an initiation era? We'll find out together as we follow what remains of that hidden trail. So now, come back with us to the Sphinx. Stand again in its enclosure, not as a tourist, but as someone who knows what this landscape once meant. The walls around the Sphinx are not just quarry scars, they rise like canyon cliffs, cutting us off from the bright desert above. Down here, the air feels heavier, quieter. The lion body stretches out at the entrance of a man-made ravine, as if guarding a carved-out duat in the very bones of the plateau. Did you know this pit lies below the natural ground level, a perfect sand trap? Leave it alone for a few decades, and the wind does the rest. The underworld fills, the guardian sinks. On the surface, it looks like erosion and neglect. But what really happened when the priests allowed their underworld classroom to disappear? If this enclosure was an above-ground underworld, then burying it is not just a maintenance failure. It is a ritual gesture. It is closing a gate. Imagine a time when pharaohs and priests led initiates down ramps into this hollow, the lion's back, towering overhead, the head rising like a fixed star at the end of a stone canyon. Here, rituals of fear, silence, and rebirth could unfold in a space that felt both open to the sky and hidden from the world. According to the stories, the Sphinx was a threshold being. When that threshold is left to drown in sand, is it a sign that the public phase of this training is over? Old legends tell a different story than simple decline. They whisper that, when one mystery school cycle ends, its temples are sealed, its chambers silenced, and the teachings move inward. What kind of knowledge is powerful enough that when the world becomes unstable, it retreats from stone into memory and dream? Look at Egypt's history. Foreign invasions shatter royal lines. Internal revolutions, like Akhenaten's short-lived focus on the Aten, rewrite the relationship between people, gods, and afterlife. Economic strain makes it harder to fund massive ritual complexes. In such storms, how long can a vast initiatory landscape be kept alive? At some point, the guardians may have decided the outer gates must close so the inner ones can survive. And then, patterned interrupt, jump forward. Roman visitors chisel their names near the Sphinx's paws, treating it as a curiosity in the sand. Napoleon's soldiers sketch a half-buried face, a lonely mask rising from a sea of dunes. For thousands of years, travelers walk past this sleeping colossus, never guessing they are trampling the roof of a once-living curriculum in how to die well. Most importantly, this leaves us with an unsettling question. If the Sphinx's burial marked the end of one era of human training for the afterlife, what has replaced it? Are we now wandering the duat without a map, improvising our journey through the gates? Or has the map changed form, hidden not in limestone corridors, but in other schools, other practices, waiting for us to recognize them? In the next part, we'll follow that question into our own time and ask whether the echoes of Egypt's lost initiations are still shaping how we meet death today. Echoes in other mysteries, guardians, labyrinths, and lost schools. If Egypt once ran a campus for the afterlife, was it the only one? Or have other civilizations built their own gates and guardians, training people to cross thresholds we barely understand today? Did you know that in ancient Greece, initiates at Eleusis also stepped into darkness to rehearse a different kind of death? According to the stories, they gathered at night, walked in silence, and descended into secret chambers beneath the sanctuary. Torches were extinguished. Sacred words were spoken that no one was allowed to repeat. Then, suddenly, light, visions, and a symbolic return. Most importantly, they emerged changed, no longer afraid of the journey beyond the grave. This pattern of descent, ordeal, and return appears everywhere. In Greece, the Orpheus myth tells of a musician who dares to walk into Hades itself, guided by song, to bring a soul back from the dead. In Mesopotamia, Inanna passes through 7 gates of the underworld, stripped of power and identity at each one, before she can rise again. In Tibet, Bardo teachings map the stages of consciousness after death, giving precise instructions for navigating terrifying visions and radiant lights. Different languages, different gods, but the same training for invisible terrain. Guardians stand at these thresholds. The Greek Sphinx of Thebes waits on a road, asking a riddle that decides who lives and who dies. In the biblical tradition, cherubim with flaming swords block the gates of Eden, keeping unprepared humans from re-entering a lost state of knowledge. Across Asia, lion dogs and dragon guardians crouch at temple gates, half beast, half symbol, warning that what lies beyond is not casual space, but a mystery that demands respect. Hybrid beings, riddles, and oaths of silence. Old legends tell a different story about why these figures appear again and again. They are not just decorations or monsters. They are signals that a boundary is near and that knowledge on the other side must be earned. Through this lens, Egypt's Sphinx and the Duat curriculum look less like an isolated oddity and more like one branch of a larger, planetary tradition. The Sphinx marks a liminal zone where pharaohs and priests may have rehearsed their passage through the 12 gates of the afterlife. The Greek initiates walked their own hidden corridors. Tibetan adepts trained in mental labyrinths, navigating inner visions as carefully as any underground tunnel. What if all of these are examples of the same human impulse to build structured, symbolic environments where we can practice dying before we die? To use myths, chambers, and rituals as simulators for the unknown? Seen this way, the Sphinx is not just a lonely riddle in the sand. It is a monumental node in a global network of mystery schools. Burying it would be like closing one of the oldest campuses in a planetary university. But what really happened when that gate went quiet? And who, if anyone, kept the curriculum alive somewhere else? We'll find out together in the next chapter. Unburying the Sphinx in ourselves. When the Sphinx went quiet, a gate closed in stone. But what happens when a gate like that goes quiet inside us? We imagine the Sphinx buried in sand for thousands of years, its lion body erased, only a weathered face staring out above a rising tide of grains. Did you know that by the time of Thutmose IV, the sand had climbed all the way to its chin? Old legends tell a different story about why, but here is the harder question. What has climbed that high in us? What inner faculty has been slowly covered, grain by grain, by distraction, fear, and cultural amnesia? Maybe it is the part of us that can look straight at the horizon of death without flinching. Maybe it is the quiet guardian that stands between our everyday identity and a deeper, more enduring self. The Egyptians carved that guardian in limestone. We carry it as a capacity of perception, courage, and truth-telling. Most of us grow up trained to look away from endings. We scroll, we hurry, we fill the chambers of the day so completely that there is no echo left. But the Sphinx, even half buried, kept facing west, toward the path of the sun, into the underworld. What would it mean for us to do the same, to let some part of us keep watch at the gate between life and afterlife, between the known and the mystery? Here the story shifts. For a moment, forget pharaohs, priests, and stone corridors. Imagine your own mystery school, hidden in plain sight. No hieroglyphs on the walls, just the curriculum of an ordinary week. An argument that shows exactly where your pride flares up. A loss that cracks the surface of who you think you are. A sleepless night, where old memories rise from the underworld of the unconscious. Each of these moments is a gate. Each asks for a password. Honesty instead of defensiveness. Compassion instead of judgment. Letting go instead of clinging. According to the stories, initiates in Egypt rehearse their answers in dark chambers. We rehearse ours in traffic, in hospital rooms, in quiet kitchens after everyone else has gone to bed. But what really happened if we treated these small, private rituals as excavations? Notice where the sand piles up. Where do we refuse to think about mortality? Where do we numb out instead of feeling what is actually moving through us? Where do we rush past the inner guardian that is trying to stop us at the threshold and say, "Do not enter this moment asleep"? Most importantly, see how small acts of awareness brush sand away from the lion's paws. One honest conversation, one evening spent facing a fear instead of running from it. One deliberate descent into a dream, a memory, a buried grief. These are tiny clearances, like the first workers hacking at the drifted dune around the Sphinx's chest. If the Sphinx on the plateau marks a gate in stone, the Sphinx within marks a gate in attention. And once we begin to unbury that inner guardian, another question appears. Who or what is it ultimately guarding us for? In the next section, we follow that question back to the horizon the ancients watched so closely. The lion still sleeps. What do you believe buried it? Who or what is it ultimately guarding us for? That question brings us back to where we began. There was a day when this lion-body, human-faced guardian simply vanished. One generation saw paws and flanks in the sun. A few storms later, only a head stared out over the plateau. And then, for thousands of years, even that almost disappeared behind a rising tide of sand. Did you know that by the time of Thutmose IV, the Sphinx was buried up to its chin, a forgotten monument in a natural sand trap? From that day of disappearance, we followed the trail forward. We watched a young prince fall asleep in the heat, dream of a buried colossus, and wake to carve the dream stele between its paws. We watched later pharaohs, Roman engineers, and finally modern excavators like Berets and Hassan cut the body free again. We stepped from the open desert into the Duart's 12 gates, into night boats, judgment halls, and hidden chambers where priests whispered passwords to the afterlife. Then we turned back and saw the Sphinx differently, not just as a monument, but as a mirror, asking what kind of knowledge we are really ready to unearth. So what buried it? On one level, the answer seems simple. Wind, time, neglect. The enclosure lies lower than the plateau, a perfect basin for drifting sand. Leave it alone for a few decades, and the desert does the rest. But what really happened when no one came, with shovels and brooms? Was this only nature at work, or was neglect itself a human ritual? According to the stories, power shifted. Priests lost influence. New rulers turned to new gods. Temples were closed, offerings stopped, and the old schools of initiation went quiet. In that silence, the sand became a veil, a de facto burial. No decree needed, only a decision not to remember. Old legends tell a different story again. They hint that the concealment was tacitly accepted, even welcomed, that when certain mystery teachings withdrew from public stone, the Sphinx's slow drowning in sand became part of the ritual. A guardian sealed, a question put to sleep until the right gate in time opened. If the Sphinx is a guardian, what was it guarding once it was sealed? A secret hall of records? A way of training consciousness? A relationship with death that our world was no longer able to hold? Did priests quietly time its re-emergence with dynastic changes, with star risings, with the turning of hidden celestial cycles? And most importantly, what does it mean that we, with cameras, satellites, and brain scans, have uncovered it again now? So where do you stand? Was this a purely natural burial by wind and time? A burial by neglect as power and resources shifted away from the plateau? A deliberate, even sacred concealment? A mystery school ritual stretched across centuries? Or some layered combination of all three? Notice which interpretation you are drawn to and why. What does that choice reveal about how you see the ancient world and about how you see yourself? Share your theory in the comments. Add your voice to this long conversation about a lion that still sleeps in our imagination. Because this is only the beginning. In the next episodes, we'll follow other temples, pyramids, and texts through the same lens, asking not just what they were, but what kind of human beings they were designed to shape. Were these places training grounds for courage, for stillness, for leaving the body and returning changed? And if they were schools, are we ready to be students again? Perhaps the real gate the Sphinx was guarding was never only in stone or sand, but in time, and the feeling that its hour is opening again.